Be me, 28, working in digital marketing. My life was pretty good, I thought. Lived with my boyfriend Tristan for about 2 years. He's a software guy, pretty quiet, very logical. In the beginning, everything felt perfect, almost too perfect. We split the chores right down the middle without even talking about it. If he cooked, I cleaned the dishes. If I did the laundry, he'd fold it and put it away. It was this easy, unspoken rhythm. We paid bills 50-50. Our apartment was nice, not huge, but it was our space. Weekends were usually chill, maybe a movie, a walk in the park, or a dinner with friends. He wasn't the most exciting guy on the planet, but he was stable, dependable. I remember thinking that this must be what a healthy modern relationship looks like, equality in action. But then, something started to feel off. It's hard to describe. It was like a low hum of dissatisfaction in the back of my mind. I started hanging out more with a new group of friends from work. They were smart, funny, and very aware. We'd go out for drinks after work and just talk for hours. The conversations were different from any I'd had before. They opened my eyes to so many things I'd never even considered. One of my friends, she was dating this guy who was a total project. She told us how she had to basically manage his entire life, remind him to call his mom, buy his own deodorant, make his dentist appointments. She called it the mental load, and it was like a light bulb went on in my head. Another friend talked about weaponized incompetence, how her boyfriend would try to do the laundry, but always mess it up, shrinking her sweaters or turning everything pink. So eventually, she just did it all herself, because it was easier than fixing his mistakes. I listened to these stories, and at first, I felt a little smug. I'd say things like, "Tristan's not like that. He actually does his share." They would smile at me, a little pityingly. One of them said, "That's what they all want you to think at the beginning. The baseline is just a performance. Wait until he gets comfortable." That line stuck with me. A performance. Was our easy rhythm just an act? I started watching him more closely, looking for the cracks in the facade. It's funny how, when you start looking for something, you find it everywhere. A few weeks later, I was having a stressful day at work. I came home and just wanted to vent, to talk about my horrible boss and the impossible deadline. I started telling Tristan all about it. He listened, nodding, but he was also scrolling through something on his phone. I stopped mid-sentence. He looked up. "What? I'm listening?" But he wasn't, not really. He was just hearing the words. I told him he wasn't paying attention, and he immediately put his phone down. "Sorry, you're right. Tell me again." But the moment was gone. He was offering a solution, a fix, but what I needed was empathy. I needed him to carry some of the emotional weight of my bad day. Instead, he just tried to solve the problem like it was a bug in his code. "You should just report your boss to HR," he said. It was so simplistic, so male. He didn't understand the nuance, the office politics. He didn't get it. Later that night, I was texting my friends about it. They understood completely. "Classic toxic masculinity," one text read. "They can't handle emotions, so they turn everything into a problem that needs a logical solution." It made so much sense. He wasn't being a partner, he was being a technician. I decided to conduct a little experiment. For years, I was the one who bought the little things for the apartment. The nice hand soap, the scented candles, the throw pillows that matched the couch. I was the one making our living space a home. He just existed in it. So, I stopped. I stopped buying new soap when the old one ran out. I didn't replace the burned-out candle. I wanted to see how long it would take for him to notice. Weeks went by. The fancy soap dispenser was replaced by a cheap plastic bottle of whatever was on sale. The apartment started to feel less cozy, more sterile. He never said a word. He didn't even notice. It was proof. He took all that aesthetic and emotional labor for granted. He just assumed the house would stay nice on its own. My next experiment was about planning. I was always the one to suggest date nights or weekend trips. "Hey, there's a new Italian place we should try," or "We should go hiking next Saturday." So I stopped that too. I waited for him to take the initiative. The first weekend, we did nothing. We just sat around the apartment, watching TV. He seemed perfectly content. I was fuming inside, but I didn't say anything. This was for science. The next Friday, he turned to me and said, "What do you want to do this weekend?" The question itself felt like a burden. I told him I was tired of making all the decisions. That planning was a job in itself. He looked completely baffled. I was just asking what you'd like to do. I'm happy to do whatever. That's the point, I said. You're happy to go along, but you don't want to do the work of coming up with the idea. He just stared at me. I could see the gears turning in his head, but he wasn't getting it. That weekend, he did plan something. He booked a table at a steakhouse. A steakhouse. He knows I've been trying to eat less red meat. I went, but the whole dinner felt like a chore. He tried to make conversation, but I could only see the lack of effort. He didn't plan something thoughtful, tailored to me. He just executed a generic date night protocol. I told my friends about it, and they weren't surprised. He's showing you who he is, one of them said. You just have to be willing to see it. The small issues started piling up, creating a mountain of evidence. One evening, I was struggling to open a jar of pickles. My hands kept slipping. He was sitting at the table and saw me struggling. He just watched for a solid minute before he got up and said, "Here, let me get that." He opened it with one easy twist. A year ago, I would have thought, "Thanks, that's sweet." Now, all I could think was, why did he wait? Why did he watch me struggle? It felt like a power play, a subtle way of reminding me that he was stronger. It was a subconscious display of physical dominance, a little piece of the patriarchy right there in our kitchen. I started pointing these things out to him. I tried to be gentle, to frame it as a learning opportunity for both of us. When you do that, it feels like you're reinforcing traditional gender roles, I'd say. Or, I'd appreciate it if you didn't mansplain my own computer problems to me. His reaction was always the same, utter confusion. He would get this wounded look in his eyes, like a dog that's been kicked for no reason. "I was just trying to help," he'd say. That phrase began to drive me insane. I was just trying to help. It was a shield he used to deflect any real accountability. He wasn't helping. He was performing his role as the capable male protagonist in our story. The relationship was no longer a partnership. It was becoming an educational project, and I was the unpaid teacher. His best friend, Emmett, came over one night to watch some game. I never liked Emmett much. He had that smug, I know better vibe. I was in the kitchen, and I could overhear them talking. Tristan was telling him about one of our recent disagreements. He was talking about how I said he was being dismissive of my emotional needs. I heard Emmett laugh, a short, sharp, cynical sound. "Dude, you're getting tangled in the buzzword jungle," Emmett said. "She's testing you. Don't fall for it. Just tell her she's being ridiculous." My blood ran cold, so that was it. Emmett was the little devil on his shoulder, whispering poison in his ear. He was validating all of Tristan's worst, most toxic instincts. He was encouraging him to dismiss my feelings, to call me ridiculous. I walked into the living room, and they both went quiet. I just stared at Emmett, who had the decency to look a little uncomfortable. Tristan looked back and forth between us, completely clueless. "Everything okay?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just went back to the bedroom and closed the door. I needed to protect my energy from Emmett's corrosive presence. After Emmett left, Tristan came to the bedroom door. He knocked gently. "Can we talk?" I let him in. I was ready to finally have it out, to tell him how his friend was a misogynist who was undermining our relationship. But Tristan started first. He told me he was worried. He said I seemed unhappy lately, that I was always looking for things to be angry about. He said it felt like he was walking on eggshells, that anything he did or said could be interpreted in the worst possible way. He was gaslighting me. He was taking my valid, well-researched concerns about our relationship's dynamic and turning them back on me. He was making me out to be the crazy one, the problem. "So you think I'm the problem?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You think my feelings about being ignored and dismissed are the issue here?" "No, I don't understand where it's all coming from," he stammered. "A few months ago, everything was great. A few months ago, I was asleep," I told him. "Now, my eyes are open." He didn't have a response to that. He just sat there, looking defeated. In that moment, I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt empowered. I was finally standing up for myself, refusing to be placated by his feigned innocence. The conversation didn't resolve anything. It just drew a new line in the sand. The next day, I decided that passive experiments and gentle conversations were not enough. The problem was systemic, and it required a systemic solution. If he couldn't see the invisible labor I was doing, I would have to make it visible. I went out and bought a large whiteboard and a pack of colored markers. I spent the entire afternoon drawing up a new chore chart. This wasn't going to be a simple you wash, I dry list. This was going to be a comprehensive domestic labor matrix. I created categories: daily maintenance, weekly deep clean, mental load management, and emotional support provision. Under daily maintenance, I listed things like making the bed, wiping counters, and running the dishwasher. Under weekly deep clean, I put scrubbing the bathroom, vacuuming, and changing the bed sheets. The last two categories were the most important. Mental load management included meal planning, grocery list creation, scheduling appointments, paying bills on time, and tracking household supplies. Emotional support. Provision included active listening sessions, conflict de-escalation, and proactive check-ins on my emotional well-being. When I was done, it was a masterpiece of organizational clarity. I assigned most of the tasks in the first two categories to him. For the last two, I wrote shared, with Tristan taking the lead. I wanted him to see, in black and white, everything that was required to run a household and a relationship smoothly. I wanted him to understand that half the work was work you couldn't even see. When he came home from work, I was sitting on the couch, waiting for him. The whiteboard was propped up on two chairs in the middle of the living room. He stopped in the doorway and just stared at it. "What is this?" he asked. "This is our new system," I announced. "This is how we achieve true equality in this household." He walked over to it and read it carefully. He was silent for a long time. I could see him reading the emotional support provision section and a little muscle twitching in his jaw. "This is a joke, right?" he finally said, not looking at me. "Does it look like a joke?" I replied, my voice firm. He turned to me and his face was unreadable. "Luella, we already share the chores. We always have." "We share the physical chores," I corrected him. "But I have been shouldering the entire mental and emotional load of this relationship for 2 years. This system is designed to correct that imbalance." He shook his head slowly. "Scrubbing the bathroom is not an emotional load." "No," I said, my patience wearing thin. "But having to be the one who remembers it needs to be scrubbed, who has to buy the cleaning supplies, and who has to ask you to do it, that is." He was quiet again, just looking at the board. "I'm not doing this," he said finally. The words hit me like a slap. "What do you mean, you're not doing this? This is insane. It's like a performance review for a relationship. This isn't a partnership, it's a job description. And I'm not signing up for the job." I couldn't believe it. He was refusing. He was actively resisting a system designed to make our relationship healthier and more equitable. This was no longer about him being clueless or ignorant. This was a deliberate choice. He was choosing his comfort over our partnership. He was clinging to his privilege with both hands. All my friends' warnings came rushing back to me. When a man's privilege is challenged, he will show you his true colors. I was seeing his true colors now, and they were ugly. The argument that followed was the worst one we'd ever had. It wasn't loud or shouty. It was cold and sharp. I accused him of being a covert misogynist. He told me I was turning our home into a hostile work environment. I told him he was afraid of a truly equal partner. He said he wasn't afraid of an equal partner, but he didn't want a manager. Nothing was resolved. The whiteboard stood in the living room like a monument to our division. For the next few days, we barely spoke. We moved around each other in the apartment like ghosts. He did his usual chores, pointedly ignoring the chart. I did mine, feeling a burning sense of injustice with every dish I washed. I knew something had to give. This Cold War couldn't last. I needed a new strategy, a bolder one. The whiteboard had failed because it still allowed for debate. It was a proposal he could reject. The next step couldn't be a proposal. It had to be a non-negotiable term of our relationship. It was time to stop educating and start demanding. The silent treatment lasted for almost a week. The whiteboard was still in the living room. Neither of us had moved it. It was this big, awkward symbol of our stalemate. Every time I walked past it, my resolve hardened. I spent that week talking constantly with my friends. They were my lifeline, validating every feeling I had. They told me his resistance was a classic sign of male fragility. He couldn't handle being held accountable, so he was shutting down. One of them, Jessica, was particularly influential. She'd been through a really bad breakup with a guy who she said was a master of performative partnership. He talked a big game about equality, but when it came down to it, he expected her to be his mother, therapist, and maid. "You have to draw a hard line," she told me over coffee. These men only understand ultimatums. They've been conditioned by society to believe their comfort is the most important thing. You have to show them that your self-respect is more important. An ultimatum. The word sounded harsh, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I had tried reasoning. I had tried visual aids. The only tool left was a clear, unambiguous boundary. I needed to create a situation where he was forced to confront the true meaning of his actions. I didn't want to break up with him. I wanted to fix him, to fix us. I believed that deep down, the good, cooperative Tristan I first met was still in there. He had just been poisoned by years of societal conditioning and the bad influence of friends like Emmett. My job was to deprogram him, to help him become the man I knew he could be, an evolved man, a true ally. The idea came to me one evening while I was scrolling through an article someone had shared in our group chat. The article was about the concept of reparative labor. It argued that in relationships between men and women, men had a historical debt to pay. Generations of women had been burdened with unpaid domestic and emotional labor. Therefore, it was not enough for men in the present to simply do their fair share. They needed to do more to balance the historical scales, to make amends. It was a radical idea, and it resonated with me deeply. This wasn't just about our apartment in the here and now. This was about justice. It was a way to frame the issue that went beyond a simple chore chart. It elevated it to a moral imperative. I knew what the ultimatum had to be. It had to be a symbolic act of reparation. I waited until a few more days had passed. The tension in the apartment was unbearable. We were communicating through terse, one-word text messages, even when we were in the same room. I picked an evening when I knew we would both be home, with nowhere to run. I asked him to sit down. I told him we needed to talk, for real this time. He sat on the opposite end of the couch, his arms crossed. He looked tired, wary. I didn't let his posture deter me. This was too important. I took a deep breath and began my prepared speech. I told him that I had been doing a lot of thinking and reading. I explained that our problems were bigger than just us. They were systemic. I talked about the history of women's oppression, about the patriarchal structures that benefit men at the expense of women. I told him that I saw our relationship as a microcosm of society, and just as society needed to change, so did we. He listened without interrupting, his expression blank. I couldn't tell if he was processing what I was saying or just waiting for me to finish. Then I got to the heart of it. I've realized that asking for a 50-50 split isn't enough, I said, my voice steady. That's asking for a neutral starting point when we are not starting from a neutral place. You have benefited from a lifetime of privilege that I haven't. A flicker of something, annoyance, disbelief, crossed his face, but he stayed silent. So, I've decided what needs to happen, I continued. As an act of good faith, as a way to prove that you are truly committed to being my partner and an ally, I need you to take on all of the domestic labor for a while. I let the words hang in the air. All of it? He asked, his voice flat. All of it, I confirmed. The cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, the grocery shopping, everything, the whole mental and physical load. He just stared at me. For how long? Let's start with 3 months, I said, trying to sound reasonable, like this was a standard trial period for a new company policy. After that, we can reevaluate your progress. He was silent for what felt like an eternity. I could almost hear him thinking, searching for an argument, a loophole. I was ready for him. I had counter-arguments for everything. If he said it was unfair, I would say justice is not always about fairness. If he said he worked hard too, I would say his work was valued by society with a salary, while mine was invisible and expected. If he refused, I would know for certain that he was not the man I thought he was. So, he said slowly, you're telling me that in order for me to prove I'm not a sexist, I have to become your servant. I bristled at his choice of words. It's not about being a servant, I snapped. It's about rebalancing the scales. It's about you experiencing, just for a little while, the reality that women have lived for centuries. It's an exercise in empathy. An exercise in empathy, he repeated, the words sounding absurd in his mouth. By doing 100% of the work while you do 0%. My work will be supporting you emotionally through this difficult but necessary process of growth, I said calmly. He let out a short, bitter laugh. It was a sound I had never heard from him before. So you'll be my life coach while I'm your maid, he said, If that's how your toxic masculinity forces you to frame it, then fine, I shot back. I can't control your perception. I can only present the opportunity for you to become a better man. I felt powerful in that moment. My arguments felt unassailable. I had logic, history, and morality on my side. All he had was his wounded pride. This is my final offer, Tristan, I said, leaning forward. This is the path forward for us. If you're not willing to walk it with me, then I don't think there's a path at all. I had laid my cards on the table. The ultimatum was clear. I expected more arguing. I expected pleading or anger. Instead, he just looked at me. His face was strangely calm. The tension seemed to drain out of him. He looked at me for a long time, as if he was seeing me for the first time. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Just that one word. Okay. I was so stunned I couldn't speak. I had been so braced for a fight that his easy agreement completely disarmed me. Okay, I repeated to make sure I'd heard him correctly. Yes, he said, his voice even. I understand. I'll do it. A wave of relief washed over me, so intense it almost made me dizzy. He got it. He finally got it. My gambit had worked. I had broken through his defenses, and he had seen the light. I felt a surge of affection for him. I knew it was hard for him, for his ego. But he was doing it. He was choosing us. Thank you, I said, my voice a little choked up. This means so much to me. You won't regret this. He just gave me a small, tight-lipped smile. I'm sure I won't, he said. The rest of the evening was a little awkward. The storm had passed, but the air was still charged. I suggested we watch a movie to celebrate our breakthrough. He agreed. We sat on the couch, not touching. I was practically buzzing with a sense of victory. I had not only saved my relationship, I had elevated it. We were going to be a model couple, a testament to what was possible when a man was willing to do the work. I fell asleep that night, feeling more hopeful than I had in months. The next morning was a Saturday. I woke up and for a moment, I forgot what had happened. Then it came rushing back, and I smiled. I stretched and decided to stay in bed a little longer. I deserved it. I could hear Tristan moving around in the kitchen. I imagined him making coffee, maybe starting on a special breakfast to mark the first day of his new enlightenment. I finally got up around 10 a.m. I walked into the living room, and he was there, putting on his shoes. He had a gym bag with him. Morning, he said, his tone perfectly normal. I'm heading to the gym. Oh, okay, I said. What about breakfast? I already ate, grabbed a protein bar, he said. I'll be back in a couple of hours. The dishwasher is full, by the way. It needs to be emptied. He said it so casually, like he was just giving me a piece of information, but it felt different. I just nodded. Okay, have a good workout. He left. The apartment was quiet. I went to the kitchen. The dishwasher was indeed full of clean dishes. The coffee maker was empty. The counter had a few crumbs on it. My new life had begun. He was taking care of things. The fact that he hadn't made me breakfast was a minor detail. He was probably just adjusting to the new routine. I spent the next couple of hours enjoying my newfound freedom. I did a face mask, painted my nails, and called Jessica to tell her the good news. He agreed, I told her triumphantly. I told you, she squealed. You just had to be firm. He's probably terrified of losing you. Now the real work begins. You have to hold him to it. No backsliding. I assured her I would. Tristan came back from the gym a little while later. He immediately went to the kitchen, emptied the dishwasher, and started wiping down the counters. He was doing it. He was actually doing it. I'm meeting up with some friends for brunch, I announced, walking into the kitchen. Okay, he said, not looking up from the sink. Have fun. I put on a new dress I'd bought, did my makeup, and felt fantastic. I was going to go out and celebrate my victory with the women who had helped me achieve it. As I was leaving, I glanced back at him. He was sorting the laundry into whites and colors. He looked up and met my eyes for a second. There was no resentment on his face, no anger, just a kind of placid emptiness. It was a little unsettling, but I brushed it off. This was a transitional period. It was bound to be a little strange. Brunch was amazing. My friends toasted me. They called me brave and inspiring. Jessica said I was doing the Lord's work. We drank mimosas and talked for hours about how we were all changing the world, one relationship at a time. I felt so seen, so validated. I got home in the late afternoon, feeling happy and a little tipsy. I expected to walk into an immaculate apartment, maybe with the scent of a slow-cooked dinner in the air. The apartment was clean, yes, spotless even. But it was also weirdly empty. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. I walked into the living room. The TV was on, but the sound was muted. Then I noticed it. The spot on the shelf where his gaming console used to be was empty. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. I walked over to the bookshelf. The whole row of his nerdy sci-fi paperbacks was gone. My heart started beating faster. I hurried to our bedroom. I threw open the closet door. His side was completely bare. Hangers empty. The shelf where he kept his sweaters empty. The shoe rack empty. I spun around, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. I ran to the bathroom. His toothbrush was gone. His razor was gone. It was like he had been surgically removed from our home. I stumbled back into the living room, my legs feeling weak. No. This couldn't be happening. He wouldn't. He couldn't. He had agreed. He had said okay. Maybe he was just moving some stuff to his friend's place to make more room. It was a stupid thought, and I knew it. My eyes scanned the room frantically, looking for an explanation. And then I saw it. On the kitchen counter, placed perfectly in the center, was a single white envelope. My name was written on it in his neat, blocky handwriting. My hands were shaking as I picked up the envelope. It felt impossibly heavy. For a second, I didn't want to open it. I wanted to put it back down, walk out the door, and come back in an hour, hoping it would be gone. Hoping this was all some kind of bizarre misunderstanding. But I knew it wasn't. I ripped it open. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly. It wasn't a long, emotional letter. It was short, terse. I unfolded it and read. Luella, it started. You were right. Our relationship did need a systemic change. I've been thinking about all the emotional labor, the mental load, and the historical imbalances you talked about. And I've realized you deserve someone who is willing and able to meet those needs. That person isn't me. My breath caught in my throat. I read on. You wanted me to prove I was your ally. A real ally wouldn't let someone they care about turn into a person they don't respect. A partner doesn't assign corrective labor to the other. That's what a parole officer does. The words felt like physical blows. Parole officer? Last night, I didn't see a partner anymore. I saw a manager who was implementing a performance improvement plan she had no intention of letting me pass. I was going to be your project forever. You weren't trying to fix us. You were trying to fix me, and I don't believe I'm broken. I sank onto a kitchen chair, my legs giving out. So, I'm making the only logical decision. I'm removing myself from the equation. This solves all the problems we've been discussing. My toxic masculinity will no longer be present in your home. You will no longer be burdened with the emotional labor of educating me. And the division of chores is now perfectly balanced. The final lines were the ones that made me feel sick to my stomach. You wanted me to take on all the domestic work. You got your wish. It's all yours now. The cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, the bills. I've left my key on the counter. I've already forwarded my mail. Please don't contact me. And at the bottom, just his name. Tristan. I read the letter again. And again. My mind was screaming. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. He was supposed to stay. He was supposed to do the work. He was supposed to change. He wasn't supposed to leave. This wasn't a victory. This was a total catastrophic failure. He hadn't understood it all. He had twisted my words, my intentions. He made me sound like a monster, a tyrant. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I tried to call him. The call went straight to voicemail. His voice, calm and even, a recording from a happier time. I tried again, straight to voicemail. I sent him a rapid-fire series of texts. How could you do this? You just walked out, without even talking to me? You completely misunderstood everything I was trying to do. This is emotional cowardice, Tristan. You're running away from the work. Please call me. No reply. The messages showed as delivered, but not read. I tried calling Emmett. I hated doing it, but I was desperate. He answered on the second ring. What do you want, Luella? He asked, his voice cold. There was no pretense of friendliness. Where is he? Is he with you? I demanded. Yes, he's with me, Emmett said. And no, he's not going to talk to you. You did this, I screamed into the phone. You poisoned him against me. There was a pause on the other end. "No," Emmett said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You did this. You took a good guy who treated you like a queen, and you decided he was a fixer-upper project. You kept pushing him, testing him, trying to break him down and rebuild him into some woke fantasy. Well, you pushed him right out the door. Congratulations." I started to cry, a mix of anger and self-pity. "He's making a huge mistake," I sobbed. "No," Emmett said. "For the first time in months, he's making a decision for himself, not trying to guess what the right answer is on one of your impossible tests. He's done being your student." Then he hung up. I sat there in the silent, empty apartment, holding my phone. The silence was the worst part. It was a heavy, suffocating thing. I had gotten what I wanted, a home free of his toxic presence. But it didn't feel like liberation. It felt like a tomb. The first few days were a blur of denial. I kept expecting him to walk through the door, to tell me it was all a big, stupid misunderstanding, and he was ready to come home and do the work. Every time I heard a key in a neighbor's lock, my head would snap up, full of hope. But he never came. I called my friends, hysterical. At first, they were supportive. "He's just trying to manipulate you," Jessica said. "It's a power move. He's punishing you for standing up for yourself. Don't give in. He'll come crawling back when he realizes he can't survive without you." I clung to that idea. He'd be back. But a week passed, then 2. The reality started to set in. He wasn't coming back. And the apartment, our apartment, started to fall apart. At first, I didn't notice. I was too wrapped up in my own misery to care about chores. I ordered takeout every night. The greasy containers piled up in the trash. The trash started to overflow. I didn't know when trash day was. Tristan had always taken it out. The dishwasher was full of dirty dishes. I ran it, but then I didn't empty it. I just started pulling clean dishes out of it as I needed them. A mountain of laundry grew in the corner of the bedroom. I ran out of clean underwear. I had to go buy a new pack. The bathroom started to look grim. One morning, I realized we were out of toilet paper. I had a moment of pure panic. I had no idea we were even running low. Tristan had always been the one to notice, to put it on the grocery list, to make sure we were stocked up. It was part of that mental load I had accused him of not carrying. Turns out, he had been carrying it all along, just silently, without needing a whiteboard to tell him to. The apartment wasn't just messy, it felt unmanaged. The bills started to arrive, the rent, the utilities, the internet. They were all in his name. The accounts were linked to his bank. I had to call each company, explain the situation, and try to get the accounts transferred to my name. It was a humiliating, bureaucratic nightmare that took hours and hours on the phone. My friends' support started to wane. When I complained about how hard it was to manage everything on my own, their sympathy felt thin. "Welcome to being a single woman," one of them said with a shrug. Jessica was the worst. "Well, you can't expect the patriarchy to be dismantled without a little inconvenience," she said, as if my overflowing laundry basket was a noble sacrifice for the cause. They didn't get it. They lived in their own apartments, or with roommates. They didn't know what it was like to go from a dual-income, dual-labor household to being completely on your own overnight. I felt profoundly, utterly alone. About a month after he left, I saw him. I was at the grocery store, the one we used to go to together. I was standing in the aisle, staring at a wall of cleaning products, trying to figure out which one was for the shower. And I saw him at the other end of the aisle. He looked good. He looked relaxed. He had a bit of a tan. He was wearing a new jacket I'd never seen before. He was laughing at something on his phone. He looked free. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. I saw a flash of recognition in his face, and then, nothing. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was just polite indifference. The kind of look you give a stranger who you accidentally make eye contact with. He turned and walked down another aisle, disappearing from view. He didn't come to talk to me. He didn't even acknowledge me. I was just a stranger in the grocery store to him now. I abandoned my cart right there in the aisle and walked out of the store. I sat in my car and just cried. That was the moment I finally understood. I hadn't been trying to build a better relationship. I had been conducting a demolition. I thought I was a surgeon, carefully cutting out the diseased parts of him. But I wasn't a surgeon. I was just a girl with a hammer, smashing something good, because I'd read a few articles online that told me it was broken. He wasn't a project. He was a person, a partner, and I had driven him away. I live alone now. The apartment is clean most of the time. I've figured out when trash day is. But it's so quiet. Sometimes I'll be watching TV and I'll hear a funny line, and I'll turn to my right to share the laugh with him. But there's no one there, just an empty space on the couch. I got what I wanted. I have a partner who never talks back, never mansplains, never needs to be educated on his own toxic masculinity. Because I have no partner at all. And I have to live with the fact that I'm the one who made it this way. I won. I won the argument, and I lost everything that mattered.